Welcome back to the Mobalytics 9.22 update and Q&A video. I'm your challenger coach, Adam Moriarty Isles, here to take you through all the changes and questions you had. As a disclaimer, I'd like to mention that we only update the low-elo list as of right now, as the high-elo one wouldn't really have a big enough dataset to make an update worthwhile at this point in time. So without any more delays, let's jump right into the update. Starting off in the top lane, our S-tier roster is going to be Teemo, Yorick, Garen, Urgot, Kayle, Kled, and Heimerdinger. Kayle moves back to S-tier as the nerfs didn't impact her as much as we initially thought they would. Despite her laning phase being weaker, her win rate only dropped by around 1%, which is not enough to knock her out of S-tier. Fiora will be moving from B to A tier right as the season is closing out as a very solid carry option in the top lane. With the popularity of champions like Mordekaiser, Garen, Aurelia, or even champions like Aatrox or Cho'Gath who are coming back into popularity, Fiora has gained a lot of favorable matchups. Unfortunately, she's still not a super good blind pick as she loses to some of the popular S-tier champions like Teemo, Kayle, or Heimerdinger, but she should be safe outside of those. Fiora is a champion that excels at dueling, meaning if she can snowball early on, she can likely 1v1 or 1v2 pretty easily, making the other team have to deal with a major split push threat, and at the end of the day, at the end of the season, people would most likely just want to go next rather than have to deal with a super fed Fiora. I know I've said similar things in other videos about dueling champions at the end of the season, but meta and mentality of player base can greatly impact the strength of a champion like Fiora who doesn't have a lot of win conditions outside of just winning lane. Unfortunately, it's likely too late to pick her up if you're going to be new to Fiora, but if you've actually played her before or had her in your champion kit in past seasons, stuff like that, I recommend picking her up as a really good counter pick option to get you some wins at the end of the season. Next up, a champion who is a little bit better as a blind pick, we have Tree Man Maokai going from B tier to A tier. Almost as if it's a premonition of his impending dominance in Season 10, he has sprouted up as a solid tank option in the current meta and is a fantastic counter to lane bullies like Pantheon who rely on dashes. That means our last change will be Dr. Mundo moving from A tier to B tier as he struggles to deal with things like Kayle or Fiora who are pretty popular at the moment. He's still fantastic into things like Teemo or AP heavy comps, he's just not so good outside of that. Moving over to the jungle, our S tier starting roster will be Volibear, Dr. Mundo, Master Yi, Nunu and Willowp, Echo, Shaco, and Nocturne. We really only have one small change to make for the jungle before the season closes out, and that's adding Shyvana back to B tier and sending Rek'Sai to the Shadow Realm in her stead as we need equivalent exchange. AD Shyvana hasn't been doing well as of late with repeated nerfs over the years due to Pharaoh Flare or the Sated Devourer days. Those were fun days. I remember the first time I tried out Sated Devourer Shyvana, I went on a 38 game win streak, but nowadays her AD build feels extremely underwhelming, kinda like watching an autofilled Ezreal try and do damage. You don't expect much and yet somehow still end up disappointed. Her AP Dragon Wizard Lady build on the other hand though is fairly strong. It is somewhat of a gimmick, but it can snowball extremely hard and catch people off guard with how insane the E damage can get. The build's pretty standard with Dark Harvest, Runic Echoes with Blue Smite, Nashers into whatever other AP items you need. It's pretty flexible. It's honestly a really fun build if you can get it rolling. Playstyle wise, you just kind of farm, focus on objectives, and look to cast with your ultimate and E combo whenever you can so you can get the items you need to actually carry. So if you're looking for a really easy to execute cheesy AP option to get you a couple extra wins at the end of the season, AP Shyvana is a decent option. For the mid lane list, our starting S tier roster will be Malzahar, Fizz, Swain, Heimerdinger, and Diana. We don't have any real changes to the list this time around, but before we head to bot lane, if I were to suggest champions to get you some quick LP with the least skill and effort required, I'd go with Diana for assassin players and Malzahar for mages. Now to the bot lane S tier roster, we got Jinx, Ashe, Jhin, Caitlyn, Heimerdinger, Yasuo, and Miss Fortune. Miss Fortune regains her S tier status just in time for the end of the season. She's one of the easiest champions to pick up in all of League of Legends, especially in bot lane, but happens to be one of the most impactful ones as well. The big difference that's come up lately to push her into S tier is people have been starting to go full crit on her rather than lethality. Now, Miss Fortune players, I get your concerns about this new crit build. I know you might be thinking to yourself, do I actually have to auto attack now with the crit version? To answer that, not as much. You will have to do a little bit of kiting and that might be scary, but I promise it's performing better than the lethality build and you should give it a shot anyways. You'll want to go Klepto while you still can abuse it, as it will allow you to reach your more expensive crit items quicker. But because it has 2 charges and double up applies on hit effects, it's really easy to proc Klepto with your Q poke off of minions or Q auto combos. As for the build, it's Essence Reaver into IE followed by a Zeal item which is most commonly Rapid Fire Cannon as it actually increases the range of your double up. I know there's a stigma behind being an MF picker, but realistically no one will remember that you played like 10 MF games at the end of the season. Just do it. People will be too focused on your negative win rate Ezreal or Kai'Sa anyways. And now we have the support S tier roster with Soraka, Blitzcrank, Janna, Nami, Shaco, and Leona. There will be no changes for supports either, so I will leave you with some words of wisdom that I like to say on stream, so listen up support mains and all field supports. If I can give you one piece of advice that will help you win games in the short term, it's to actually build support items, please. So many support players, especially frontline players, try and rush laner items. Leonas are going Thornmail first, like why? Support items were designed to be overly gold efficient so that supports can be impactful with less income. Why do you think other roles are always trying to build support items, huh? It's because they're overly gold efficient. Junglers, top laners, AD carries, everyone tries to build support items when they can because they're so good. But support players are the only people who actively attempt not to. So the next time you pick Leona and try and first item a Thornmail, picture my incredibly handsome face looking down at you in a disappointing manner. Just do it. Stick with regular support items. It's not difficult. Our first question for the Q&A portion will be from Sin Lee on YouTube, who asks, explain to me how the frick Heimer is S tier in top lane, mid lane, and bot lane. What it comes down to is how flexible Heimerdinger is as a champion. He provides so many different things for his team. Wave clear, CC, consistent damage, pick potential, split push potential, he's almost got it all. The only thing he really lacks is mobility, and what this means is that if Heimerdinger's numbers are strong enough that he is so versatile that he can play multiple roles. Once the buffs to his turrets and grenade CC came in on 9.19, Heimer's numbers were high enough for him to come back into a meta that favors him due to all of the melee and short range champions that are popular at the moment. The other bonus of Heimer is how consistently and easy it is for him to win lane, or at minimum go even, with very few matchups that don't allow him to do this. It's kind of like playing against Teemo top lane. He's just gonna either go even or smash a melee champion. It's just what happens. This gives Heimerdinger a lot of win condition options in a stable early game, making him an extremely optimal pick for climbing. Plus, he actually beats Teemo, which not a lot of champions beat him in lane. Next up, we have an Instagram question from Stewie119 who says, may I ask why Qiyana is not on the normal list? Yes, you may ask that. Qiyana, as shown by her performance at Worlds, is an incredibly strong roaming mid laner who can make insane outplays and 1v9 teamfights with her ultimate. So the question becomes, why would her performance be worse at lower levels of play when her playstyle should suit it with her heavy roaming and teamfight ability? What it really just comes down to is mechanical ability. Though most people think she's face roll because in the early game her combo is super easy to pull off, in fact it's almost impossible to miss, it's when the teamfight phase comes in that she starts to fumble. It's kind of like LeBlanc. A lot of people can actually play LeBlanc in the early game and during the laning phase and be just fine, but it's transitioning that lead into actually winning teamfights and being useful where people struggle. Not to mention, on average, AD assassins don't scale well, and normally are pretty unforgiving in teamfights, as one misstep and you're pretty much dead. The issue with Qiyana in particular is how reliant she is on hitting a good ultimate. If she happens to not hit a perfect ultimate, she has one of two options. Go in anyways and die, or back off, unable to contribute pretty much anything to the fight, as it's really too difficult for her to get in and deal any kind of DPS without it. Think of her team fighting kinda like Evelynn. If Eve doesn't have ult up, she can only wait around to clean up, and it's the same as Qiyana. They don't contribute anything outside of just waiting on the outside to steal kills. Knowing this, with players being less consistent at teamfighting at lower levels of play, and games dragging out longer so that the game often boils down to 5v5 in the mid lane, lesser skilled Qiyana players just won't outperform things like Malzahar or Nivea without proper flanking and mechanical outplays. The sad truth is that at lower levels of play, oftentimes the simplest things to execute are the things that do the best. Our next Instagram question comes from Alejandro FM Radio, who asked, did Jungle Pantheon really fall from grace this hard? I feel his E still makes him plenty useful. Short answer, yes, he sucks. Long answer, though his E makes him useful, it does not enable him to be useful enough to win on a consistent basis. Regardless of the skill level, Jungle Pantheon's win rate is usually below 47%, and for good reason. From the jungle, his itemization is actually worse than in lane, as he would much rather have Ghostblade for the movement speed over warriors. Aside from that, he's received repeated nerfs to his early game farming, and gank potential went way down. He can still snowball early on and dive towers with his E, but he is god awful if anything goes wrong. Pantheon jungle is pretty much just a worse Xin Zhao at the moment. His early game isn't even that powerful or over the top in terms of dueling, and a lot of common picks like Nocturne, Lee Sin, or even Vi can beat him in the early game now. I'm not gonna lie, if I want someone to flash cheese level 2 gank, I would much rather have a Xin Zhao or Jarvan on my team. This doesn't mean that Pantheon is a bad champion, as like you said, his E is still really useful. I would just highly recommend you play him in the top lane instead, where he has an easier time snowballing the early game and actually building the items that he wants. This next question comes from Mihak Pavlovic, who asked, why isn't Olaf in any tier for low elo? So I actually get this question a lot, and that's because Olaf is a champion you'll see in competitive play or even high-end solo queue hard stomping the early game with his insane dueling and clear speed. The reason why he doesn't show up on the low-elo list anymore is actually for one simple reason, and that's that Olaf is possibly the worst scaling champion in the whole game. He's definitely in the bottom 5. What this means is that if you fall behind on Olaf or do not end the game by 30 minutes, then your team has to play a 4v5. At lower levels where mistakes happen more often and people are less objective focused, either the Olaf themselves or the team will not close out the game quickly enough. I know I've mentioned this before, but the average game time at lower levels of play is at or around 30 minutes, which perfectly negates when Olaf wants to end the game. At higher levels of play, average game times are well below 30 minutes, so Olaf's insane early game can and is utilized more often, resulting him in losing one of his major loss conditions, as games are decided before 30 minutes anyway, so the only issue he can run into is whether he snowballed or not. That's pretty much the main reason behind his non-appearance on the low-elo list. He's simply not designed to do well in this bracket, he's just too inconsistent. If he doesn't snowball, useless. If the game goes to 30 minutes, useless, and these are not things you want in low-elo games. And our last question comes from HJWISJ2K, I don't know how to pronounce your name, who simply asks, where is Braum? Braum is in the Shadow Realm where he belongs, and for good reason. Though he has always been a staple in competitive play due to his peeling ability, and so he was pretty much just nerfed to keep him in check despite his terrible solo queue performances over the years. Now, you know that Braum sucks right now when not only is he not picked in solo queue, but he's not picked that often in competitive anymore either. But for solo queue specifically, what it comes down to is something similar to why TK support sucks in solo queue and something I've mentioned in the past, and that comes down to Braum having teammate scaling on his abilities. What I mean by this is that he not only has to position well to peel for his teammates, but his teammates also need to actually stand behind him, and shocker, they need to auto attack to proc his passive. This means that his teammates actually need to work with him to have him effective at a base level, which is never a good sign in solo queue. He actually needs other people for his kit to work. And I know what you're thinking, but don't enchanters rely on other people? But even compared to enchanters like Janna or Soraka, Braum just isn't able to as easily deny the enemy team without the person he is peeling for working with him. If your auto-filled Misfortune gets jumped on by a Rengar when you play Janna, you just miss your Tornado and then ultimate the Rengar away. If you try that same thing with Braum, you might shield a Misfortune, but then she won't run the right way, or remember to auto-attack to proc your passive, and then she'll just die anyways. He's just too difficult to pull off with so little gained, as he doesn't even have a lot of proactive options. Instead, if you want to win solo queue, I highly recommend you just pick Leona or Nautilus. They're still tanky, they can still peel, but they can actually make plays on their own, and it's not even hard for them to do. Thanks for watching our tier list update and Q&A video for patch 9.22, and as always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below, or go to our Discord server in the link provided, where you can ping me in our tier list discussion channel. Don't forget to try out Mobalytics today at mobalytics.gg, and I'll see you summoners out on the Rift.